talk about sacrifice and death flags galore. I mean, it's probably, in terms of the TV scene, what Milo saw, it has to be some form of torture scene. It probably was both Jobby and the sister, but if it was one of them, I imagine it's a lot easier to torture a girl who's on her deathbed who isn't, like, gravely ill to the point of, like, barely able to stand up. Jobby's an old man. I imagine if you're torturing him on TV the same way, would imagine that probably would kill him, but maybe that's why it was such a shocked reaction. Either way, I think Milo saw some form of torturing scene, which is why he wants to take on the burden of going to rescue them, because you don't really go on a mission that way unless you're trying to rescue people. So I don't think, like, he killed anyone on TV, but man, that governor is up to no good, that's for sure. Bisco himself is pretty much on his deathbed. Apparently his organs are so bad he can barely lift his foot up to kick. I mean, he does have the cure, the Rust Eater cure, which, I mean, I was surprised we got in this episode. I mean, a lot of us were probably thinking that, like, okay, if we actually can discover the Rust Eater and make a cure, like, where does the story go from here? And clearly episode 7 just proved with the whole kidnapping plotline and everything like that. But the idea that before even the shit really hit the fan, Pau literally gave up her cure to give it to Bisco because, one, it's no guarantee that she's gonna make it out alive going back into such a hellscape. But the idea that she firmly believes that Bisco is the one that will keep Milo the most safe, so if his disease gets any worse, he can at the very least cure himself, and she'll use the other cure for Jobby, right? But, like, the death flags and the sacrifice, I mean, in terms of, like, worst case scenario, it's definitely Bisco and it's definitely Pau, but at the same time, Milo going in at alone, he's definitely improved, and I mean, the trailer, the preview for next week's episode, it definitely looks like he's going to be able to make a fight and make sure that the governor has to put up a fight, but I mean, shit ain't looking good, and we're only episode 7 right now. We still have another 5 episodes left. Like, where we're currently at in this show honestly feels like where we would be at with episodes 11 and 12, right? This normally would be like episode 11, episode 12 would be the big rescue mission, and then maybe a death or something like that. But holy shit, like, this show is pure excitement. And while I would argue, I would say the pacing was the fastest we've seen currently in this show, like, it honestly felt like we went from trying to kill Bisco to romantic butterflies to trusting Bisco a lot faster than maybe it should have. Like, maybe we're missing 5 or 10 minutes worth of, like, padding in between everything. But at the same time, I kind of like the fact that the sister plotline wasn't dragged out just because she thought, okay, you kidnapped my brother, you possibly killed my brother, you brainwashed my brother, but then, honestly, when your brother's there and you can hug him and he explains things, of course you're going to understand that it was a misunderstanding, and you're going to start questioning maybe things aren't as they seemed with how the government has been portraying things, especially if we're saying that there is a rust cure here from these mushrooms, as we get the, basically, information saying that the mushroom keepers have very specific blood. Now, I have a feeling they weren't born like that. I almost feel like it's some form of mutation. Like, you know, those weird experiments where, like, you know, if you want to become a super soldier, you have to undergo these, like, this vigorous ritual where maybe they give you a blood transfusion or something like that. Because as we see with Bisco, he can jump a lot higher than the average guy. Like, there is some superhuman elements to his character. Not like to the point of Captain America level modified, but it does give me the impression that he is a modified human in some way. So I'm curious if that's the reason behind the blood and the fact that it reacts to this mushroom in such a way. I mean, we haven't seen the cure in action. We don't know if the cure is actually going to work. And now that the government has the entire, like, damn mushroom thing after killing that beast, shit ain't good, all things considered. We have 2 doses of a potential cure, and if they made it incorrectly, we might not have any cure whatsoever. And if we have to go fight another one of those things to get the Rust Eater, it's overall worst case scenario, while having all the characters minus Milo himself being kind of deathly ill. Like, our 4 characters, Jobby's an old man thrown into a wheelbarrow who's on death's doorstep. The sister is, you know, she can still fight, but I mean, at the same time, depending on what happened on TV, maybe not. Our best fighter is apparently deathly ill, and if he goes on any sort of mission, he's probably not going to make it out alive. And then we have Milo, who definitely has improved with his combat, I mean, but he's still not ready to be on his own, it feels like. So it's like, this shit's worst case scenario. And the fact that this is episode 7, and the fact that, you know, just imagining this plot line, maybe we get episodes 8, 9, potentially 10, revolving around the rescue mission. Where the hell do you go after that? Is it like you have to flee? Are you wanted criminals, like more so than usual? Do you start making a cure? Like, where does the story go? Because I'm pretty sure it has like at least 8 light novels or something like that. So it's one of those things where I'm curious, because this almost feels like the end game, but knowing that not only is there more anime left, but the fact that there's so much more source material left, I'm very interested, I guess is how I'd say. I'm not concerned, because nothing about this show has concerned me, but it is one of those things when you think about a lot of authors, this could be the jumping the shark moment for a lot of authors, but given the confidence that this show has going for it and the fact that it does feel well thought out and well planned, and I mean, even though I thought the pacing was a little faster in this episode, it still has me just as excited, and honestly probably more excited and fearful than I've ever been watching this show. It's just really interesting to think about, and honestly, I'm excited, man. I really, really am. I think the worst thing about this episode might have actually been just the overall animation in like the first fight there, because there was definitely a lot of wider shots that were a little held on to longer than needed. But some of those close-ups, especially with like the weird fingers like holding on to the sister, were really grotesquely detailed, and I absolutely adored looking, as much as I wanted to throw up sometimes looking at some of the designs, man. It's like a weird worm snake creature. It's just like, it's so goddamn gross, but it's so cool all at the same time. I mean, it'll be interesting too, because I think depending on how like part 2 of the story goes, because I feel like we're still in part 1 of the story, right? You know, trying to rescue people, make the cure. Depending on where they go, they could have a really interesting sequel bait kind of like ending, like within the last episode or 2, that could very much like promote that source material so much that we do end up getting a second season, which honestly think second seasons aren't really even that rare anymore, because so much anime is being made. At the end of the day, committees are throwing darts at a board and reviving things that have been gone for 6 years, not because there's necessarily a massive demand for it, but just because we need to continue the pipeline in terms of having every anime come out at every possible moment. So we'll get a second season, I'm pretty damn sure of this someday. I mean, even if it doesn't do as well as I think it currently is doing, eventually they're going to need more shit to come back, and this show's probably going to be one of them. But it is one of those things that I think, in terms of like actually baiting people into wanting to check out the source material, this one might actually have one of the best reasons to do so, because we're probably going to have a pretty satisfying stopping point for the initial part of the story, and then what either they start it up or they tease where the story's going next. It could go into some really interesting details, especially in the government side of things, because this government seems like, you know, we can't trust them, we can't do anything. But potentially there's other locations, other cities that maybe would, and are we going to build up into wars? And I don't know, like there's a lot of potential routes they can go. But I mean, if this show needed any more reason to prove why it's one of the underdogs and best shows of the season, Episode 7 definitely delivered in my opinion, even though I thought the pacing was a little faster than we're used to. But thoughts and feelings, either if you know the source material, if you're brand new to the show like myself, feelings on where it might go after that dramatic cliffhanger and the numerous death flags. I think we have at least 3, potentially 4 if you include Milo. It's kind of insane to say the least, but thoughts, if you have any, leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here. Until next time everyone, please take care and have a good one.